There are victories that change a ranking, victories that fill a trophy cabinet, and victories that disappear from memory the moment the next tournament begins. Then there are the victories that answer a question a player has been carrying for months. For Alex Eala, the question had become impossible to ignore. Could she finally beat Iva Jovic? Twice in 2026, the answer had been no. First came the disappointment at Roland Garros, where Jovic defeated her 6-4, 6-2. Then came an even more painful loss at Queen's Club, a 6-2, 6-2 defeat that lasted only 76 minutes and exposed just how difficult the matchup had become for the Filipina. Jovic had broken Eala's 5-match winning streak on grass, struck 26 winners to Eala's 12, committed only 9 unforced errors compared with Eala's 19, and converted 5 break points. It was not simply another defeat. It was the second time in a matter of weeks that the same opponent had found the answers before Eala could even finish writing the questions. And that was what made the next chapter so fascinating. Jovic was not just another rival standing across the net. She was one of Eala's closest friends on tour. They had known each other since their junior days, their paths crossing at the 2022 US Open, where Eala won the girls' singles title. They had played doubles together, spent time together away from tennis, explored cities, shared dinners, and developed the kind of friendship that can make competition even more complicated. Because when you know an opponent that well, there is nowhere to hide. She knows your patterns. You know hers. She understands what you like under pressure, and you have studied the same weaknesses in her game. Friendship does not make the tennis easier. Sometimes it makes it harder. Jovic had explained that reality clearly after one of their earlier meetings, saying she wanted Eala to win every match she played, except, of course, when they were standing on opposite sides of the court. And Eala had been equally honest about the challenge. The difficult part was not simply that she was playing a friend. The difficult part was that Iva Jovic was a very good tennis player and a fierce competitor. That distinction mattered. The story was never about friendship preventing Eala from competing. It was about a rising star confronting a matchup that had, at least twice, exposed areas of her game she still needed to solve. So when the two young players were brought together again, in New York at the Stars of the Open, the exhibition carried a layer of drama that no ranking points could create. Officially, this was not a Grand Slam match. There were no points on the line, no prize race being decided, no title at stake. The Stars of the Open was part of US Open Fan Week, an event designed to entertain fans while supporting the USTA Foundation and its work with youth tennis and education programs through the National Junior Tennis and Learning Network. Tickets began at an accessible price point, and part of the proceeds were directed toward a network of more than 270 organizations serving hundreds of thousands of young people. On paper, it was an exhibition, but tennis stories are rarely written only on paper, because for Eala, this was also an opportunity to face the player who had beaten her twice, an opportunity to test whether the lessons from Paris and London had actually changed anything, and perhaps most importantly, an opportunity to do it under the lights of Arthur Ashe Stadium, with the US Open about to begin, and the attention of New York already turning toward the next generation of the sport. The atmosphere was built for a moment like this. Arthur Ashe Stadium is the largest tennis stadium in the world, and according to the information provided, the crowd of around 23,000 came ready to watch 4 of the sport's most exciting young names, including Eala, Jovic, Joao Fonseca, and Lerner Tien. Yet, for Filipino tennis fans, there was one matchup that mattered above all the others. Eala against Jovic, friend against friend, 2 rising stars, and an 0-2 record hanging quietly over one side of the court. The previous meetings were impossible to ignore. At the French Open, Jovic had taken control with a 6-4, 6-2 victory. Eala had competed, but the American had found a way to pull the match away. Then came Queen's Club, and that result was even more decisive. Jovic's forehand dictated play. Her confidence was obvious. According to the supplied match information, she won 81% of her first serve points and produced a level of aggressive, controlled tennis that left Eala struggling to establish the rhythm she wanted. A 6-2 scoreline can tell you many things, but above all, it tells you that one player found clarity while the other kept searching. For Eala, the challenge was obvious heading into their next meeting. She could not simply hope that Jovic would have a bad day. She had to change the dynamic. She had to take control earlier, prevent Jovic from dictating with the forehand, and trust her own game enough to avoid becoming trapped by the memory of those 2 defeats. That is often the most difficult battle in elite sport. Physical adjustments can be practiced. Tactical changes can be discussed with coaches. But the memory of defeat follows a player onto the court. You remember the points that slipped away. You remember the patterns that hurt you. You remember the opponent standing across from you, and wonder whether the same story is about to happen again. That is why what happened in New York mattered. According to the information provided, Eala did not step onto the court looking like a player burdened by a 0-2 record. She came out aggressive. She took control from the baseline. Instead of allowing Jovic to dictate the exchanges as she had in their earlier meetings, Eala began forcing the American to react. Her movement was sharp, her shot selection was more precise. And perhaps the most important difference was psychological. She played with the confidence of someone determined to create a new memory. And the crowd felt it. Every point Eala won brought another surge of noise. Filipino flags waved around Arthur Ashe Stadium. The support that has followed her throughout her rise was once again impossible to miss. Eala has become more than just a tennis player to many of those fans. Her success represents something larger. A breakthrough for Philippine tennis, a reminder that a player from a country without a long tradition of producing women's single stars can stand on the same stage as the biggest names in the sport. That emotional connection gave the night an energy that went beyond the format of the match. But the crowd could not win the points for her. Eala still had to solve Jovic herself. And this time, according to the supplied account, she did. The first set went Eala's way. That alone represented a change in the story. In Paris and London, Jovic had controlled the momentum and won both encounters in straight sets. Now, Eala had placed herself in front. The question immediately became whether she could sustain it. Because beating a player for a few games is one thing. Closing the door on an opponent who has already beaten you twice is another challenge entirely. This is where old doubts can return. One loose service game, one brilliant run of winners from the other side, and suddenly the past begins to feel present again. But the supplied information describes Eala as remaining composed and aggressive. She continued dictating rallies and keeping Jovic under pressure. The American, so clean and controlled in their earlier meetings, was reportedly more error-prone on this occasion. And that shift was significant. Eala was no longer reacting to the matchup. She was shaping it. That is the difference between simply playing better and actually solving a tennis problem. Eventually, the second set followed the same pattern, and when the final point was played, the story that had followed Eala through the summer had finally changed direction. Alex Eala had beaten Iva Jovic. It was, importantly, an exhibition victory rather than an official tour result, and that distinction should not be ignored. It does not erase Jovic's 2 official wins at Roland Garros and Queen's Club, nor does it change the official head-to-head record in the way a sanctioned WTA or Grand Slam match would. But dismissing it as meaningless would also miss the point. Athletes do not simply carry statistics into their next competition. They carry belief. For Eala, this victory provided evidence that the matchup was not an unsolvable puzzle. She had lost twice. She had studied what went wrong. And on one of the biggest stages in tennis, she found a different way through. That is valuable, especially with the US Open main draw approaching. The timing could hardly have been more intriguing. According to the information provided, Eala arrived in New York at a career-high ranking of world number 18, making her the highest-ranked Filipino tennis player in history and placing her in position to be seeded in the women's singles draw for the first time in her career. Whether every ranking detail in the supplied material is independently confirmed or not, the broader significance of her rise is clear within this story. Eala is no longer simply a talented young player trying to force her way into the conversation. She is entering major events with expectations, attention, and a growing belief that she can compete with the players around her. That represents a dramatic change from the position described just a year earlier, when she was still fighting to establish herself in major main draws. Now, the pressure is different. When you are outside the spotlight, every victory feels like a surprise. When you climb the rankings, the surprises disappear. People begin expecting you to win. Opponents study you more carefully. Crowds recognize you. Draws become more complicated because you are no longer the unknown player no one wants to talk about. You become part of the tournament story before the first ball is even struck. And that is where the Jovic victory becomes more interesting than a simple revenge narrative. It offered a glimpse of Eala's ability to adapt. Jovic had beaten her with authority. The first loss had been convincing. The second had been even more one-sided. There was no reason for Eala to believe that simply repeating the same approach would produce a different outcome. So something had to change, whether tactically, mentally, or both. The supplied account suggests that the biggest difference was her willingness to play on the front foot, to dictate rather than defend, and to trust her own movement and shot selection instead of allowing the previous defeats to define the next meeting. That may prove to be the most important lesson of the entire night. Great players do not avoid difficult matchups forever. Eventually, they have to solve them. Every era of tennis has produced examples of players who initially struggled against a particular opponent before finding the adjustment that changed the rivalry. Sometimes it is a technical change. Sometimes it is patience. Sometimes it is simply the confidence that comes from realizing the other player is not unbeatable. Eala's victory over Jovic does not mean the rivalry is suddenly one-sided. In fact, it may mean the opposite. It may be the beginning of a much more interesting chapter. Jovic is still one of the brightest young players in the American game, and the friendship between the two only adds another layer to every future meeting. They know each other, they respect each other, and based on the information provided, they have both spoken openly about expecting to face one another many more times. Jovic had even suggested that Eala would eventually get her back. In New York, that prediction appeared to come true. But now comes the more difficult question. What happens when the stakes are real again? What happens when there are ranking points, prize money, a place in a semifinal, or a grand slam run on the line? What happens if they meet in the US Open itself, or at another major tournament months from now? That is where this story could become even more compelling, because the exhibition may have given Eala confidence, but it also gives Jovic a new problem to think about. The version of Eala she defeated in Paris and London was not the same version she encountered in New York. That is how rivalries evolve. One player wins, the other adapts, and suddenly the old patterns become unreliable. The next meeting becomes a completely new test. Beyond the individual matchup, the night also represented the continued growth of Eala's profile. Arthur Ashe Stadium is not just another venue. For a player whose journey has already captured the imagination of Filipino fans around the world, appearing on that stage carries symbolic weight. She won the girls' US Open title as a junior in 2022, and returning to New York as an established professional represents another step in the same journey. The city has already played a role in her story. Now she returns with more experience, a higher profile, and a larger group of supporters ready to believe that her biggest achievements may still be ahead. That is why the noise inside Arthur Ashe mattered. That is why the flags mattered. And that is why even an exhibition match carried emotional significance. The Stars of the Open was designed to entertain and to support a charitable cause, and that purpose should remain at the center of the event. A portion of the proceeds supported programs using tennis, education, and mentorship to create opportunities for young people. But sport has always had the ability to create meaning within those larger occasions. On this night, Eala found hers in a simple but powerful reversal. Twice beaten, twice searching for answers. And then, under the lights in New York, she finally produced one. Not because the past suddenly disappeared, but because she refused to let it decide the future. That may be the real lesson as the US Open begins. Rankings can rise and fall. Draws can open or close. One bad day can end a tournament, and one inspired performance can change an entire season. But confidence is built from moments exactly like this. Moments when a player confronts the opponent she could not beat, the stage she might have found intimidating, and the doubts that have followed her from one tournament to another, and discovers that the story is not finished. Alex Eala's win over Iva Jovic at the Stars of the Open may not count as an official tour victory, but as a statement of belief, its significance is impossible to ignore. She now knows she can beat a player who had defeated her twice. She has shown that adjustment is possible, and with the US Open main draw waiting, that may be the most important thing she takes from Arthur Ashe Stadium. Because the next time she walks onto a court against Jovic, or any other player who believes they have already figured her out, the old version of the story will no longer be enough. Alex Eala has changed the equation. New York saw it, the crowd felt it, and now, with the biggest tournament stage waiting, the question is no longer whether she can solve a difficult matchup. She already has. The question now is how many more barriers this rising Filipina star can break before the tennis world finally realizes that this is no longer just a remarkable story in progress. This could be the beginning of something much bigger.